I just want to start by thanking Allah for the most forgiving, easygoing students in all of Chicago. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد ما شاء الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I'll get right to it because I'm late and spare you the pleasantries that we've grown accustomed to. This is the Al-Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya, Imam al-Tirmidhi, all about the description, the personal affects, the character, the characteristics of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi wasalam. And, I think all of us know at this point, why this is important. I think in an age like ours, where there is so much controversy swirling around, issues of human rights, mostly. The early Muslim community, their debates were about theology. It was all about, God, all about, reason and the createdness of the Quran and the proper place of rationale in our theology, etc. We as a community tend to debate those things much less, actually. One contemporary historian of Islamic history, he said that the global Muslim community has never agreed upon more concerning Allah than they appear to agree now, right? Our differences are all about human behaviors. We're debating about gender. We're debating about race. We're debating about sexuality. We're debating about class. We're debating about war. We're debating about... So when you look at the Shahada as kalimatan, two statements, our community is negotiating Muhammad Rasulullah much more than it's negotiating La ilaha illallah, if you understand what I'm saying, right? So at a time like that, there couldn't be a more timely book than the Al-Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya, right? When we're thinking about what is demanded of us as Muslims, it's the Muhammadan example, right? Remember, if you remember nothing else from this course, that the thing that makes a Muslim, and my mother is a Muslim, alhamdulillah. The thing that makes a Muslim is Muhammad Rasulullah. We're actually not the only people who believe in La ilaha illallah. There's actually many different traditions and communities that maintain La ilaha illallah. There's nothing worthy of worship besides Allah. What makes our community unique? Muhammad Rasulullah. That, if you accept that, you become a Muslim, right? So this is good. This chapter, only 2 hadith in the chapter, but both of them more interesting than they appear at first blush. باب ما جاء في صفة درع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. What has been narrated concerning the description of the armor of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. And it says, عن زبير ابن عوام قال كان على النبي كان على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوم أحد درعان. He said, during the battle of Uhud, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was wearing 2 pieces of armor. This is actually a big deal, because if anyone was confident that God was going to grant him victory, it was the Prophet Muhammad alayhi wasallam. In truth, he had already been promised victory over his oppressors. He had already been promised victory over his adversaries, but he still wore armor. Many scholars say that this is a sign that even if your victory in something is assured, you still prepare. Even if, when I was in Yemen, and I was studying Arabic in Yemen, there was one student, his name was Abdul Sabur. If he sees this, Salamu alaikum Abdul Sabur. He was my roommate. His father was Chinese and his mother was Pakistani. And I might be recollecting his history incorrectly, but from what I remember, he really got serious about, he was an engineer by trade, a very intelligent guy. And he got serious about Islam only when he was in college. He grew up in China, but he went to do his graduate degree at Westminster in London. And it was there in London that he got serious about Islam. And he decided that he wanted to learn Arabic. He is, to date, the hardest working student that I think I've ever shared space with in my studies. We had like those little Arabic dialogues. He would memorize the entire dialogue. And then he would practice by doing both parts himself. كيف الحال؟ أنا بخير. كيف أنت? You know, he would remember, the joke was, I would be like, yo. And when we had an exam, he would go into like super prep mode, like not sleeping. I'm like, it's just an Arabic learning institute in the middle of Yemen. This isn't, it's not like you're getting a transcript or something like that, right? He was my roommate. I could hear him at all times of night, practicing, working hard. Then there was another brother. He was one of the most spiritually aware people that I ever encountered during my studies. And when we had an exam, he would say, I sit sending salawat on the Prophet Muhammad, I sit asking Allah to bless the Prophet, and then I expect that the Prophet will come to me in my dream and give me the answers to the test. Dead serious. We said, aren't you going to prepare? He would hold up his beads. I am preparing. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Abdul Sabur got an A. This brother, whose name I won't mention, he failed. And I will never forget the contrast of going to school with both of them. Right? Abdul Sabur, who prepared laboriously and exerted himself, he passed with flying colors. And this brother who, and let me tell you, he was pious. Now, it wasn't just, when I mention that story about him, it makes him sound ridiculous. Somebody that has an exam and just says, I'm gonna send salawat on the Prophet, but he actually wasn't a ridiculous person. He was a truly pious man. I never saw him quarrel with anybody. He was the most generous with his things. He had phenomenal character. He was easy to talk to. I never saw him judge anyone. So my point is that this brother wasn't a bad person. He wasn't like some fool that had this affected kind of religious sense, but the contrast between them is that the latter was not connected to anything practical. And the former was. When we read this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we learn that to be involved in the details, to be involved in the nitty-gritty, to prepare for your MCAT, to prepare for your LSAT, to look at financial reports and all kinds of analysis before opening a business and demographic reports, that is a part of the sunnah. It's not just that you say, I want to make sure the investment money is mubarak. I want to make sure the money I invest with comes from no haram sources. And I want to make sure that everybody involved in this project is a Muslim that prays 5 times a day. And I want to make sure that the first person that comes into my store is Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah. And I'm not saying those things aren't important, but still do your homework. Prepare. Protect yourself. It's like Salat al-Istikhara. Salat al-Istikhara, subhanAllah, I find that there's a lot of misconceptions about Salat al-Istikhara. Some people think that Salat al-Istikhara is just a prayer you make for marriage. Yo, babe, what's that marriage prayer? Marriage prayer? I'm not sure I know what you're referring to. The prayer you make when you're trying to get married. You mean istikhara? That's a prayer of decision making. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يعلمنا صلاة الاستخارة كما يعلمنا سورة في القرآن. The Prophet used to teach us to make istikhara like he would teach us a chapter of the Quran. And he would say, Salli salat al-istikhara fil umuri kulliha. Pray istikhara for all of your affairs. Pray istikhara for all of your matters, big and small. But istikhara is not about omens. See, some people think istikhara is about omens, that you pray the prayer of decision making and then you look for an omen. It's like, okay, I prayed istikhara before the job interview, and then I went into the interview, and the interviewer was wearing a green tie. Assalamu alaikum. The interviewer was wearing a green tie, and my favorite color is green. So I think this is the job for me. No, that's not. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do that, but that is not the essence of istikhara. It's not the essence of istikhara is not you pray the prayer and then you look for an omen. No, you pray the prayer and then you look for tama'nina. It's mitnan fil qalb. You pray the prayer and you look for contentment in your heart. That is the sign that you have prayed istikhara well, is that whatever the decision you're making, you don't feel any ittirab. You don't feel perturbed. See, if you're perturbed as you're taking the job or perturbed as you're getting married, you're like, then you have to pray the istikhara, right? The sign of the istikhara is that I'm cool. And why does istikhara make you cool? Because you have asked Allah for the good in this. You have asked Allah to give me the good in it for my, for dunya, في الدنيا والمعاش وعاقبة أمري, my worldly affairs and my livelihood and the way that I end my life. فإن كنت تعلم أن في هذا الأمر خير لي في ديني ومعاشي وعاقبة أمري وقدره لي. Oh God, if you know this to be something good for me in my deen, in the end of my affair, in my livelihood, decree it for me. وبارك لي فيه, and bless me in it. ويسره لي, and make it easy for me. وإن كنت تعلم أن هذا الأمر شر لي في ديني ومعاشي وعاقبة أمري. But if you know that this is something bad for me in my religion and in my livelihood and in the way that I end my life, وَاصْرِفْهُ عَنِّي, take it away from me. وَاصْرِفْنِي عَنْ, take me away from it. ثُمَّ قَدِّرْ لِي الْخَيْرُ حَيْثُ مَا كَانَ, then decree for me the good wherever it is. وَأَرْضِينِي بِهِ, and make me pleased with it. You pray that prayer, you feel contentment, you choose what you incline toward. What istikhara gives you? Protection against remorse, protection against regret, and it gives you a positive lens through which you look at whatever happens. Maybe you pray istikhara, you get married, and you end up getting divorced. Don't say, oh, I didn't pray the istikhara right. I should have known when she had an orange dress on instead of a red dress. I don't like orange. I should have known it wasn't going to work out. No. I got married and I got divorced, but I prayed istikhara. So you know what? That was the best thing for me in my deen, in my livelihood, in my khatim. That was the best thing for me. Maybe I don't understand how it was the best thing for me, but I learned something, or I saw something, or maybe some of the du'as that I made when I was going through that situation, it might be those du'as that get me into heaven, right? I prayed istikhara, I took the job. A month into the job, I recognized I don't like this job. That doesn't mean I didn't pray the istikhara right. It means that no, taking this job and leaving this job a month later, that was the best thing for me. Maybe some of the prayers that I prayed while I was in this tense position, those will be the prayers that get me into Jannah. Maybe, some of the sadaqah I gave because I was making a lot of money at a job that I didn't feel comfortable with. That sadaqah might be the sadaqah that gets me into Jannah. Maybe I learned about myself. This job had a really high salary, but I didn't enjoy it. Now I know quality of life is more important to me than salary. And if I didn't take this job, I would have never learned that. Right? The istikhara always works. It's not a question of, man, I didn't pray it correctly. I didn't look at it right. Right? The other thing, and this is consistent with this hadith, كان على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوم أحد درعان, the Prophet was wearing 2 coats of armor, is that when you make istikhara, you also have to make istishara. You have to talk to people. Right? You make istikhara, you pray, then you ask people, what do you know about so-and-so? Why are you asking? I'm considering her for marriage. What do you know about this person? Why do you ask? I'm thinking of going into business with them. These are 2 things that the fuqaha, the scholars of Islam, they say if people come to you in those 2 mawaqif, those 2 situations, asking you for an opinion about someone, you have to tell the truth. You don't have to dirty them up. You don't have to mention unnecessary things, but you have to tell the truth. I'm considering so-and-so for marriage. What do you know about him? Well, he's a good brother, but I do know him to have issues with his temper. I do know him to be quick to anger. So that, if he were marrying my daughter, that would be concerning to me. And for people on the other end of that, everybody comes with stuff. If we ask enough people about anybody, are we only going to hear good things? Well, I'm sure you haven't spoken to everyone yet. Are you all going, so doesn't mean that she'll say, okay, I'm not going to marry him. And that shouldn't be your intention. It's just enough to say, I would be concerned about this, right? In the Sahih, a woman came to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi wasallam. I have 2 suitors, I have 2 men who want to marry me. She gives their names. The Prophet alayhi wasallam says, as for him, he's a heavy-handed man. He's not gentle. So he was preparing her. Not saying that if you marry him, you will be abused, because we don't know that. But I do know that he's a heavy-handed person. This hadith is also a proof that the Prophet ﷺ regarded heavy-handedness for men as a character flaw. When men were heavy-handed, he regarded that as a character flaw because he needed to mention that to her. He's not, this is a part of his deen that is weak. He's a bit heavy. The way that he is with women is, not as gentle as perhaps you would like, right? And then he said, as for so-and-so, he's very poor. So if you marry him, you should prepare yourself for a life of hardship. Which, I always tell people, man, my job with both of my daughters is just to help them see clearly what they're getting into with regard to money. With regard to character stuff, I'll just tell a brother straight out, no. Nah, man, no way. With regard to money, it's just to help you see clearly, just to break it down. As long as you have clarity, I find that money isn't really a major issue. As long as you have clarity. You're accustomed to going on vacation every year. You marry into that situation, that might not be the case. Say bye to Whole Foods. Say hi to Aldi. Trader Joe's and Aldi's owned by the same person. No, I'm just kidding. What I'm saying? You're accustomed to getting a new car every 3 years. Might not be the situation this time. If she says, I'm okay with that. I like the brother. He's solid with his character, solid with his deen. If living with him means living a life of some zuhud, alhamdulillah, I'm ready for that. Bismillah, you have my blessing. I just wanted to make things clear to you, right? Once I was attempting to get married, and the thing that probably frightened me the most is he said, well, she's accustomed to, my credit card that has a very high limit and she just buys what she wants. And I don't give her any problem about that. She's my daughter. Can you keep that up? Absolutely not, sir. It's good talking to you. That's what she's accustomed to. That is how I've raised her. She has the credit card, she buys what she wants, and I don't even look at the bill. I just pay it. Can you provide that? No, I can't, sir, but it was nice knowing you. Now, I actually ended up marrying her. Allah yarhamuha. Right? Allah yarhamuha. Right? He appreciated the fact that I told him the truth. No, sir. He said, a good thing for you, she's not looking for that in a husband. She knows that you're just starting out. I just wanted to see if you tell me the truth. Yeah, but I'm gonna lie and say, yeah, I can do that. No, sir, it's good talking to you. You're right, she deserves a wealthy man. Call me back. No, that's okay. No, that's okay. Right? But you have to be honest. So making istishara, talking to people. Some people think like istikhara absolves. There's the spiritual power in istikhara that absolves them of regular research, doing pros and cons, analyzing a situation, good investment, bad investment. You pray istikhara, but you still have to do that. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was promised victory by Allah. Wa ala nabiyyi sallallahu yawma Uhud dir'an. He had 2 coats of armor. Yes. Like, Bismillah, we have to stop. Bismillah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين آخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. So we'll stop with pray Maghrib and then we'll resume with whatever time we have left, inshallah. Allah yubarik feek. Allah yubarik feek. MashaAllah. السلام عليكم. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, عن الزبير بن العوام قال كان على النبي يوم أحد درعان فنهض إلى صخرة فلم يستطيع فأقعد طلحة تحت وصعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حتى استوى على الصخرة قال سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول أوجب طلحة. During the battle of Uhud, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was wearing 2 pieces of armor. He attempted to climb upon a rock, but was unable. So he had Talha sit by the rock and he climbed upon him. And then he climbed up until he reached the top of the rock. I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, Talha has made paradise incumbent upon him. So there's a lot in this very beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. She's praying the wrong direction. There's a lot in this hadith that is very, very beautiful. The Prophet ﷺ, now Uhud, even when looking at the Battle of Uhud, Jazakillah khair, even when looking at the Battle of Uhud, Uhud was a military defeat. You know, it's no way to sugarcoat that. You know, I know some people would like to think that this is the messenger of Allah. Of course, he was victorious on every battlefield that he stepped upon. No. In fact, when Abu Sufyan went, because, you know, the Prophet ﷺ sent letters. He sent a letter to Ethiopia, to the Najashi, which is, of course, a name I love. My son's name is Najashi, right? And the Meccans, they sent Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhu, to track the Muslims. At this time, Amr was not Muslim. But the Prophet also sent a letter to the Byzantines, right? In Syria, in present-day Syria, right? The heart of the Eastern Roman Empire was Byzantium. And the leader of the Byzantines at that time was Heraclius. And the Prophet ﷺ also sent him a letter inviting him to Islam. And Abu Sufyan went to intercept the letter. But one of the things that I remember about the conversation between Abu Sufyan and Heraclius, he said, how have you responded to his call to God? And Abu Sufyan said, we have fought him. He is disrespecting and dishonoring the tradition of our ancestors, and we fought him. And Heraclius said, when you fight, who wins? Does he win or do you win? And Abu Sufyan said, sometimes he wins and sometimes we win. And Heraclius said, such are the battles of the prophets of God, because sometimes God is teaching them gratitude and sometimes God is teaching them patience. And when you think about the lives of the people of God, they're characterized by the same thing. Sometimes we're in ni'mah and God is teaching us gratitude. We're in blessing. And sometimes we are in ibtila. We are in trial and God is teaching us patience. The Battle of Uhud was something we can only refer to as a military defeat. And God was teaching the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum jami'an patience. And sometimes you will go through battles in your life in which you have to learn patience. You will, being a believer almost entails suffering some losses in the dunya. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes a loss in the dunya serves the purpose of lessening our attachment to the dunya, right? Sometimes a loss in the dunya exposes the impermanence of everything in the dunya. It's like, man, if I didn't lose, maybe I would have started investing this with my entire heart. Like, I started to think this business was everything until COVID hit and the business went out of business. Now you say, man, I gave so much time to this pursuit. Think about like a person that spends all day waxing his car, washing his car, detailing his car, goes into the parking lot of the restaurant, somebody turns in and hits the car. In that moment, he must recognize, subhanAllah, all the time that I invested into this, and just like that, that's the entire dunya. But what is with God? Baqiyatul salihat. What is with God is khayrun wa abqa. It's better and it's lasting, right? The primary characteristic of akhirah is it's lasting. Everything we have here is fleeting. I was at Jummah on Friday, and the Imam said, food is a good analogy for this world. He said, the moment of enjoyment with food is when the food is on your palate, it's on your taste buds. But right after you swallow it, it's over. It's not like you can still enjoy it as it's going down your esophagus. It's like, that's good. Ooh, that's really good. Then as it gets to your stomach, that's still good. And you don't enjoy it when it comes out on the other end. Right? Right? That's food. The enjoyment in the food is just a short-lived enjoyment. Sometimes ibtila or hardship in the dunya, it reminds you, don't plant all of your seeds here, because the harvest here is short-lived. The harvest there, khayrun wa abqa. It's more lasting. One of the analogies that I have found very effective when talking about dunya and akhirah is thinking about your home and the hotel room that you're staying in on the road. If I had a home that was dilapidated, falling apart, the plumbing was bad, the wiring was bad, the roof was about to cave in, the foundation was cracked, and I did nothing for my home. My home is literally falling apart. I check into a hotel room, and I start, without asking the people that own the hotel, I start doing my own renovations to the hotel room. I call somebody, put up wallpaper here. I tell somebody else, this cheap hotel furniture, bring me the best furniture. Bring me something handmade. I don't want this cheap stuff. These sheets are only 400 thread count. Bring me the 2,000 Egyptian cotton thread count. I don't like this. This bed, I need a better bed. It's not soft enough. Then I go into the bathroom, I tear down the backsplash. I need better tiling here. Then I replace the television. Then I go and let's say I buy the most expensive art that I can find to adorn the walls of the hotel room. And then in the morning, I check out and I leave all of that and I go back to my dilapidated house. What would you say about me? What would you say about me? I did all of that for a night. And then I go back to my dilapidated house and I live there. You would say, something is not right. Something is off. He put all of that effort into a hotel room and checked out in the morning. He went back to a house where he lives and it's falling apart. One of my teachers said, this is the method of the dunya and the akhirah. The dunya is the hotel room. And we put all of the effort and the energy into beautifying it. Even though we're checking out in the morning. You're checking out in the morning. But the home that we're going to live in, reside in permanently, it's falling apart. Plumbing needs to be fixed. Wiring needs to be redone. There's no art. It has no beauty. There's no art on the walls. It's just a dark, damp, dilapidated place. But that's where we live. Don't put all of your eggs in this basket, man. وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Don't forget, don't forget your share of the dunya. but don't put all of your investment in the dunya. And some of the spiritual masters, some of our mashayikh, they say that when you experience losses in the dunya, it's a reminder. This isn't, that's the nature of this. It goes up, it goes down. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. The word for money or the word for gold in Arabic is dhahab, right? Because it goes, man. It doesn't stay, right? It's not makath. The word for money is not makath. It's something that stays, right? It's dhahab. Something, it goes, right? You hear it, gone, right? So the Prophet ﷺ did suffer losses in the dunya. Then it says, فَنَهَضَ إِلَى الصَّخْرَ فَلَمْ يَسْتَطِيعَ. The Prophet ﷺ was trying to climb a rock and he couldn't do it, right? He couldn't get up there. So Talha ibn Ubaidillah got on the ground and made himself the booster. Said, Ya Rasulullah, go ahead and climb up. So the Prophet ﷺ placed his foot on Talha and then climbed upon the rock, and he was able to do this. And the Prophet said to Talha, the bushra, with this act, Talha has guaranteed paradise for himself. أوجب طلحة. So just think about that, man. Just putting himself in a little bit of discomfort for the sake of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet promised him Jannah. And he is from the Ashar al-Mubashar. The companions promised Jannah. He just put himself in a little bit of an uncomfortable position, right? Just a little bit of an uncomfortable position. And it was probably his joy to do that, right? One of the signs of true love for anyone or anything is that when you make sacrifices for it, they don't really feel like sacrifices, right? It's not hard, right? It's not hard. One of my teachers used to say, when a man loves a woman and loves his children, he'll work 8 jobs if he has to. I care about these people. I want them to be comfortable. And if someone says, man, you're working 8 jobs, alhamdulillah, I care about these people, man. So if someone asks Talha, the Prophet he stepped on you, he probably would have been elated. Nah, I can still feel his foot on my back. SubhanAllah, he stepped on me. And he stepped on me doing something for the sake of Allah. Right? So, these were people having an experience, These were people having an experience. I think sometimes we read about the Prophet ﷺ and we're reading about him now. But when we hear these stories about like the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum jami'an, 2 things I always want you to think about. One, don't think that they were gullible in some way. There's a certain bias with which we read about the past, and we think them to be simpletons, simple people. When you're, and that is something that we have been given by our education, Western education. You look at the past, it's like those simpletons. They didn't really know anything about the world, right? These were primitive people. They were silly people. They didn't understand self-respect and dignity like we do. No, wallahi bil'aks, quite the reverse. These were people that had more of a sense of honor, of izzah, than we do. We probably would find it strange the way they thought about self-respect and honor. So when Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab saw somebody making salah for the first time they saw it, they said, you expect us to grovel on the ground like that? Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they didn't say that, but we're saying that. To practice your religion, a person has to get on the ground and dirty his clothes and put his face in mud? You expect us to do that? Never. that was beneath their sense of self-respect. We don't do that. So for somebody like Talha ibn Ubaidillah, who grew up in the same culture that they did, to willingly and readily and happily put himself on the ground to say, Ya Rasulullah, use me as a step stool. Whatever you need to do, I'm here. That's an act of love. This is somebody who deeply loves the Prophet ﷺ. You know, funny thing, my wife went to the comedy joint, the Hassan Minhaj show, Saturday. And I was asking her about how it went. And one thing she did share from the show was that he said, there are things that I would do for my daughter that I wouldn't even do for my wife. Like, I love my daughter in ways that I could never even love my wife. And he told a story that one day his daughter was picture day and there was snot coming down her nose or something like that. And somebody said, ill, and he was drinking something. He took a straw and sucked the snot right from her nose, right into his mouth. Now I said, I wouldn't even do that for Asi or Makita. I'm not gonna lie. I said, Hassan, you got me there, man. I wouldn't do that. I love Asi, but I would probably told Asi, you know, no, the best I can do, I would have used my shirt. It's my daughter. But there are people who, man, when you love, you love. So when you read stories of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would make wudu, and the su'r, the leftover water, they would fight for it. I want it. These are not simpletons or gullible people. These are people having a deep experience of love, man. Right? When you read the story of the woman who said the Prophet ﷺ was asleep in her home and he was sweating because it was a hot day and she was catching the sweat from his head, right? And he woke up and saw her doing this. What are you doing? He said, the sweat that comes from your head, I use it to perfume my house. I've never smelled musk sweeter than this. So these are people, I want you to read that not as something strange, but as something that people having a very deep experience of love will do. Just talk to someone that's really, really been in love, right? So it's an experience. You know, things that you would think, no, I would never do that. There's a guy somewhere right now with his wife wearing his coat and he's freezing, pretending like he's not cold. It's okay. I'm good. It's cool. You sure? Yeah. I'll deal with the discomfort because it's more important to me that you're comfortable than that I'm comfortable. That's how they were with the Prophet ﷺ. It's more important to me that you can do whatever you're trying to do than me being uncomfortable. Yeah, go ahead. Step up. Just go ahead. MashaAllah. And the last hadith of this section, and we'll finish with this, same hadith, but we have to cover all of them for the barakah. عن السائب بن يزيد أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان عليه يوم أحد درعان قد ظاهر بينهما. During the battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ wore two pieces of armor, one overlapping the other. So again, the same principle. Even if you're guaranteed victory, you still protect yourself. Right? Even if you know the battle is won, you still prepare. Right? You still get yourself ready. Right? So أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاك الله خير. جزاك الله خير. Got here a little late, but I think we made pretty good use of our time. We made pretty good use of our time. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, sister? Alhamdulillah. You just, no, mashallah. Thank you, thank you. You just came in today and just cleaned up, reminded us about the prayer. You turned the sister in the right direction in the prayer. You're getting all the rewards today.
Did you know that day that she was going?
I didn't know that day,
Okay.
but the whole thing was so unexpected. But I'm so happy. I'm just, it's like, it's a happiness that doesn't wear off. You know, every time I wake up and I remember like my mother's Muslim, I just get happy all over again. A lot of it, it's a blessing, but it's also a challenge because I have, you know, now I'm trying to teach her, trying to, you know, I want her to have a good experience with